live long and prosper. So in this video series, I'm going to be talking through the social justice elements of every episode of the original series of Star Trek. The thing that inspired this project was actually a Fox News article which argued that Star Trek has in some way betrayed its traditional commitment to sort of political neutrality or middle ground by embracing progressive politics. In this series, we're going to see that Star Trek has always embraced progressive politics, and it's always been aspirational for social justice in various senses. I am taking a broad perspective on social justice here, so that may include multiple different types of social justice, whether that's racial, whether that's economic, whether that's religious, whether that's abilities, gender and sexuality, anything broadly considered. I will go through every episode. Some of the episodes I will interview fellow Trekkies and talk with them about it. And then below, in the descriptions, I will give you additional information about the episodes, particularly their original air date, who wrote the screenplay, and who directed that episode. I also want to dedicate this series to my dad, Michael Allen Zapkin. He was an OG Trekkie from back in the day, and it was watching the original series with him that I came to love Star Trek. So in this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Jeff Yeager, and we're going to be talking about Mirror, Mirror. We're going to start off, I'm going to let Jeff introduce himself, and he'll give you a brief plot summary of the episode. Then we're going to jump into some of the social justice issues. Jeff, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I'm always glad to be here, Phil. I've joined Phil for a couple of Star Trek episodes already. But my name is Dr. Jeff Yeager. I'm an assistant professor of English at Bluefield State University. I actually was a grad student colleague with Phil at West Virginia University. And I've always been a big Star Trek fan, big sci-fi person. So definitely happy to be here and to discuss this episode. Mirror, Mirror has always been a popular Star Trek episode. The basic plot summary is Captain Kirk, Scotty, Dr. McCoy, and Lieutenant Uhura all are beaming back up from this planet. Basically, there was a issue on the planet where they wanted to mine
dilithium crystals.
Yeah, they want to mine dilithium crystals, which helps power the starships. And the native people on the planet are pacifists, and they don't trust that the Federation will use the dilithium for pacifist ends. So they're worried that the captain will wage a war on their planet if they don't give up the crystals. But in the process of beaming back up, there's an ion storm, and they get transported into this parallel universe, where it's in the parallel universe, the Federation, instead of being this peaceful, hopeful entity, they're this barbaric, almost fascist sort of operation. We find out as soon as they get there that power in this organization, that it's definitely not like traditional military powers, just who rises to the top in this sort of social Darwinist way. And the whole episode is about Kirk trying to delay the killing of these people. And he's challenged by Chekhov at one point. Sulu is also just the third in command on the ship, and he's also trying to grab the power. He's also being creepy with Lieutenant Uhura, and basically Spock still is rational, and Kirk is trying to get the Spock in that universe to kind of see that what this Federation is doing is not logical. It's immoral and illogical. And Kirk also has sort of the Kirk in that universe also has a woman on the ship named I think it was Marlene, and we find
something
out,
like that.
Yeah, we find out that she and the Kirk in that universe have a tool that allows them to pretty much kill anybody and make them disappear. So after Spock challenges Kirk, they beat Spock 4-on-1. It takes 4 of them. And Sulu challenges Kirk after that, and Marlene makes them all disappear. And the episode ends with Kirk being able to go back to his universe with the hope that the Spock in that universe will start a revolution. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about with this episode, a lot of social justice elements here. Let's start, I guess, with let's start with the Halkans, the native people on this planet who have a philosophy of absolute pacifism. No, we can't give you the dilithium crystals, because if even one living being is killed through their power, then that violates our absolute ethics. So, proper Kirk is like, let's see if we can convince you. Maybe we can work something out. Mirror Kirk is like, I'll destroy your planet and kill your entire species, and then we'll take the crystals anyway. So I think there's a lot of interesting competing forces here. Where do you want to start with this? I think the absolute pacifism is worth talking about. Obviously, genocide is worth talking about in terms of social justice. The proper Federation's potential use of the crystals is worth talking about. What do you think is most interesting?
I would say here that there's definitely a Vietnam War subtext. The war, by the time this episode kicked off, I don't think the war had gotten fully into effect, at least to the American side yet. But I think we might have been.
I think this is 68 that this episode comes out.
60. Well, we were then. I thought it was around 65. So yeah, we were definitely in the middle of that. There was, of course, conscientious objectors to the Vietnam War. So yeah, I think the audience who saw this episode would have noticed that. But other than that, I would say, well, of course, being a West Virginian, one of the things that struck out to me was the whole mining subtext. Whether or not the Federation was benevolent or not, they were still extracting a natural resource from this planet. And when we know how mining and extraction works, as soon as that resource is gone, what is the planet? What is the area worth? Yeah. So there's definitely an ecological subtext to this.
Well, and I think that's an interesting point, too, because the coal mined from West Virginia, from Kentucky, Tennessee, wherever it is, powered U.S. steel production, and U.S. steel production meant weapons manufacturing. I mean, it still does. The U.S. is one of the biggest arms manufacturing countries in the world. So, yeah, I mean, there's that element. Like, this resource is going to be used for military purposes, even if the Halkins, even if the miners of Appalachia are not involved in that military purpose. They are still supplying a fundamental resource that goes to it. And there's an ethical question mark with that.
Yeah, we know they're right, too, from the other Star Trek episodes. The Federation's always in conflict with the Klingons and the Romulans.
Yep.
So, yeah, they definitely have a point here that even as the Federation tries to be benevolent, when others aren't benevolent, it's hard to remain completely benevolent.
Mm-hmm.
So you could kind of imagine that after this valuable resource is mined, like maybe the planet would fall off their radar, but that's one of their most valuable resources. So there's definitely an ethical quandary there. You went a couple of other places with this as well. The whole issue of pacifism. You can kind of definitely see there the Quakers,
Yeah.
as a religious group. Like you can definitely see a little bit of that there. It is interesting that Captain Kirk is kind of of course, I'm sure he's operating on orders, but it's interesting to see that he's so patient with them and trying to negotiate. Even if they don't go along with it, he's ready to move on. That's an admirable trait. Whereas the other Captain Kirk's ready to blow them all up if they don't go along. And,
well, I mean, that's his orders in Mirror Universe. Is there isn't a like maybe we can negotiate type thing. It is we come down, we make the demand, then if you say no, we destroy your entire civilization and all your people. Like that is standard operating procedure in Mirror Universe. So yeah, I mean when proper Kirk transported to Mirror Universe says we're going to give him 12 hours and then we'll see what happens there. Like that's actually a violation of his orders. So that produces another sort of interesting issue in terms of resisting unjust laws or unjust orders in this case. I don't think you'd brought up Vietnam before. I don't think by this point, I don't know when the My Lai massacre happened, and I don't think it was really common knowledge in the U.S. at the time. But I mean, there's a lot of ethical problems with the way the U.S. Campaigns were run in Vietnam, and there were concerns both from within the military and from the anti-war movement that like war crimes were being committed and that average soldiers, line officers, things like that should refuse to follow unjust orders.
Yeah, we definitely know that there was no shortage of unjust things that happened during the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
I think 1968 was the year that the Tet Offensive happened. So that was the year that
I think so.
Especially, that was especially the year that public opinion started to sour on the Vietnam War. The American
Yeah.
government, the American government has sort of created this through the media, this sort of image that they're doing a glorious, that they're there for a good cause, and the war was coming to an end, and then that happened, and suddenly that was the whole goal of the insurgency. Kind of, they know that an insurgency is always fueled by popular opinion. Like you can't defeat the American military, but you can defeat them in the court of public opinion. So the offensive definitely turned things around. So yeah, I think that this audience, especially this year, would have definitely been aware of that. Of course, I don't know when the Kent State massacre was.
Yeah.
That I'm sure it had happened already. So that was probably in the minds of a lot of the people watching this.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot going on. And then, of course, the other context in terms of disobeying unjust laws and things like this is the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr. sort of makes famous in U.S. culture this idea of nonviolent civil disobedience. The letter from Birmingham City Jail aligns the civil rights movement with this ethos of peacefulness and this idea that if a law is unjust, then we have an ethical obligation not to follow it. And that ethos is definitely here in Kirk's response to this mirror universe, particularly the genocidal order to destroy the Hawkins.
I think too that there's probably a colonial subtext here as well. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. We also can't forget Gandhi and with the British Empire.
Yeah.
So I think that you could probably make the case that the Federation, by mining this resource, is kind of colonizing this world. So
I mean, we've definitely seen mining colonies in other episodes before. The Devil in the Dark, Mudd's Women. In this context, I don't know. I mean, I guess it would depend on what this mining operation would look like. If it was staffed by Federation personnel, then definitely. I don't think you're wrong that there's a potentially colonial element here. If this is a trade relationship, that's maybe less problematic than if this is like, hey, let us come and set up mining facilities on your planet and take your natural resources. That's definitely more concerning. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Well, maybe I think the subtext is probably there, but keep in mind the Star Trek War, they don't have money. So, maybe it's more of a even exchange kind of deal.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think we get to see. I mean, we don't get to see much of the negotiations. I don't think we have any real sense of what proper Kirk is offering in exchange for the crystals. So
it's also interesting that all this stuff over just getting a 12-hour timetable to make up their minds, that's so controversial.
Yeah.
Why not just wipe them out right then and there and save their 12 hours?
Yeah. And I mean, that's a controversial enough thing in Mirror Universe that Chekhov is like, okay, now I'm free to try and assassinate Kirk with my henchmen, and nobody is going to be like, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Like that legitimately authorizes him to murder the captain of the ship so that everybody can move up in rank. And actually, I want to talk about that as well, because you had mentioned that is not the way that most militaries tend to work. That's definitely the case. I actually think it creates. I think even by the vicious, violent logic of Mirror Universe, it raises a number of problems. Probably the most significant, for me at least, apart from the ethics of like murdering people, assassinating people, I think the most problematic element for me is just, if you're in a military situation, you kind of need to be able to trust the people around you. And if at any point anybody might try to kill you, it's very hard to have that kind of trust where you'd say, all right, we're going to work as a team to achieve this shared objective. I don't know. What do you think? Is there an argument maybe that like the logic of violent punishment can maintain that kind of discipline and unit cohesion? Or I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it definitely takes away the power of the captain, because if the captain's going to be undermined at every decision that violates the norm, we've seen plenty of decisions like that across all the Star Trek shows and films, then of course that definitely waters down captain's power.
Yeah.
But even the whole issue of how does this Federation keep everybody in line, you can kind of imagine that there's going to be the whole idea of revolution comes up at the end. You can imagine that a revolution would probably be pretty easy to spark if you have a leader who's charismatic enough to kind of stop any uprisings from happening. This Kirk has the power to do that. Of course, this Kirk seems to fall in line with the Federation, but you can kind of imagine that a revolution would be easy to spark in that way. Because how does the central authority control all these rogue captains?
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't. I can see Kirk's point. It's not the most logical of structures. I can't think of any military that has ever been run that way. Even like the Red Army and the Nazis, didn't really even operate that way. Maybe back in like, I don't know how historically accurate I am, but maybe back like the Huns or something, some group like that might have operated that way. I'm just speculating there. But
even ancient armies that I can think of, I don't know. I think it's such a bizarre idea that like, if you kill the person above you, you then just get to take that person's spot consequence free. But you were talking about the idea of revolution, and that's definitely crucial here. I don't know how easy I think it would necessarily be to spark a revolution. Like proper Kirk clearly suggests it is, and he's got that sort of great line at the end. In every revolution, there's one man with a vision. trying to get Spock to be the leader of this new sort of revolutionary movement. But I mean, one of the problems is, in order to have a revolution, you kind of need a critical mass of discontented people who will buy into that same vision. Sure, Spock can take over the Enterprise and can use the considerable power of the Enterprise to try and fight off the rest of this empire. Whether or not one starship is going to be successful, but like, is he going to be able to get, like, Sulu is probably Mirror Sulu, who is violent and arrogant and whatnot, is probably not going to get on board with, let's have a revolution that overthrows the governing logic of the empire to establish peaceful, benevolent cooperation.
That brings up that old Machiavellian idea of, is it better to be feared or loved? Like what in The Prince. And you can't argue that fear isn't a powerful motivator. It's hard if people are scared. It's hard for them to bust out of that and go against that impulsive fear. So yeah, I think it's. I can't imagine. It would be interesting to have like a follow-up to this, like a graphic novel or something. It's probably been done.
Probably.
But I can't imagine this Spock being. Spock's never really that charismatic of a figure anyway. Like, he's always butting heads with Kirk and McCoy. I can't imagine this Spock being charismatic enough to incite a revolution, appealing to people's reason instead of their fear.
I mean, the other element with that is, like, even if you go to people and are like, hey, I've got this vision for a better world where we aren't continually concerned about being randomly murdered, like, that typically is going to sound pretty good to most people, I think. But if you live in this sort of totalitarian world where violence is a continual threat, I suspect that what you're going, like, your reaction when someone comes to you with that proposition is going to be, you're trying to trick me so that I'll say something against the Empire and then you can kill me. Like, it's unlikely, I think, that most people would be like, yeah, that sounds great. I will participate in this revolutionary movement, and I'm not worried about potential consequences or betrayal or something like this.
Yeah, I think it's probably a cynical way of looking at it. I think it's just human nature not to jump on board with something like that, unless, like you said earlier, unless there's already a group of people already very discontent. Like the French Revolution, everybody is sparked because everybody was already discontent. So I can't see people breaking out of their fear in this world to do this. But perhaps that's reading it cynically. Maybe there is an element of hope that people can I would like to think that people can overcome that negative emotion and be better and have the full potential that they do in real Kirk's world.
Well, and it's interesting because in the Mirror universe, Kirk asks Mirror Spock how long until the Hawkins vision of galactic peace is realized, and Spock says 240 years. I don't know where the fuck he came up with that number. Like, there's no logical way that you could arrive at that conclusion, but you can reason that an empire built on fear, built on authoritarianism, built on genocide, etc., will collapse. That's a reasonable conclusion. But this is the collapse of this empire and its replacement by some sort of peaceful system is treated in the episode as a certainty. And yeah, I think that's very much a sort of hopeful 60s moment that maybe in our sort of post-Watergate world, post-Vietnam world, many of us are less willing to sort of embrace that optimism. And I mean, of course, especially with the sort of continuing structures of racial inequality following the civil rights movement, the continuing patriarchal inequalities following the women's liberation movement, continuing homophobia, transphobia, etc., following gay liberation, etc. I think we probably are today more cynical about this sort of, in every revolution there's one man with a vision, sort of great man narrative of history.
That was 20-some years after this, the Soviet Union did fall. And,
yeah.
During the 60s, they were still very much a powerful country. Their fade hadn't really begun as much yet.
Yeah.
But what happened after that? Not too long after that, another ruthless dictator took over Russia.
Yep.
Putin. So, it's how much of an improvement was there really there? So, same thing with China. The Chinese government today is oppressing the Chinese people.
Yep.
They seem to be like one of the most powerful countries in the world, even with all that oppression. Yeah, I would like to think that all these different countries can eventually see the light and collapse. But when a military is so strong, as is in the case of China and Russia, like, can a revolution like back in the 18th century happen with when the military is that strong? It would have to be started within the military. Military coup.
Yeah, unfortunately, military coups rarely lead to peaceful democratic civilizations.
As we know from all of the, especially the conflicts in Africa, right? A lot of those countries have set up many military coups, and nothing's really progressed. I'm skeptical that a revolution can even happen in a country, especially with Star Trek, where its power's even more tenfold with all the technology. I'm skeptical one can happen. But maybe I'm just. I would like to think so. Though. I want to keep that hope that the episode projects.
Yeah. Well, let's leave it on that note then. We hope for a revolution to create a peaceful democratic civilization. Whether it's gonna happen, I don't know. But all right, again, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me and talking about Mirror Mirror. It's been fun.
Yeah, this episode is definitely one that Star Trek fans point to as one of the better episodes. Just as a side note, before we leave, I also wanted to point out how much these mirroring universe narratives are taking over our pop culture today. Like, we could definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know how many narratives like this came before this episode, but yeah, we see it all the time today. The Marvel films, the DC films, the mirror parallel universes, especially as the science has evolved on this subject. It's completely taken over a lot of, especially pop sort of texts. So we don't have to go deep into that. I thought that I would just point that out. How this episode definitely has an age because this is a popular theme.
Definitely true. Yeah, that's I think a really good observation.
All right, Phil, I appreciate you.
Yeah.